Rain swept the ramparts of Eldengar in relentless sheets, each gust of wind howling through arrow slits, as if mourning the fate of those trapped within. The fortress, carved from the bones of the mountain itself, trembled beneath the weight of the storm and the secrets it harbored. In the chapel, where candlelight flickered against ancient tapestries and shattered saints wept from stained glass, Lady Serelith pressed trembling hands to the altar. Her lips moved in silent supplication, yet her heart pulsed with a different prayer, a hope unspoken, a longing she had buried beneath duty's iron mantle. Outside, the bell tolled midnight, its echoes swallowed by thunder. The world, for one suspended breath, seemed to hold itself in anticipation. Then came the sound, the battered gates grinding open, voices raised in alarm. The sentries had brought a captive, a figure slumped between them, bloodied and rain-soaked, his armor marked by the hawk of House Varin. The torches cast wild shadows as they dragged him across the courtyard, through the heavy doors, and down the corridor toward the keep. Serelith watched from the shadows, her heart hammering in her chest, every fibre of her being straining against recognition. But when the prisoner's head lifted, dark hair matted to his brow, it was as if the years between them fell away. Kadrin, the boy who once raced her through sunlit meadows, whose laughter lingered in her memory like the taste of summer. Now a fugitive and traitor, cast down by fate and her own house's sworn enemy. A surge of forbidden feeling swept through her, fierce and raw as the storm outside. She moved before she could think, slipping from the chapel through a side passage, her feet finding the familiar path to the great hall where the wounded were brought. Each step echoed with memories, of promises whispered beneath the old oaks, of the ring hidden beneath her gown, pressed into her palm the night he left for war. The world had changed since then, hardened by siege and betrayal, but the ache in her chest remained. Within the hall, the air was thick with the scent of blood and wet leather. The king's men clustered around the captive, stripping his armor, binding his wounds with rough hands. Their voices rumbled with suspicion. The king's envoy, a cold-eyed man named Sir Adrian, demanded to know the rebels' purpose. Serelith lingered at the threshold, veiled by shadows, her heart in her throat. When the soldiers dispersed, leaving Kadrin alone on a pallet by the hearth, she slipped to his side, her hands trembling as she reached for the bloodied linen. He stirred, pain etched into the lines of his face, yet even now there was something unbroken in his gaze, a defiance that remembered sunlight, not just storm. Serelith's touch was gentle, her fingers ghosting over his wounds as she worked in silence. He tried to speak, but she pressed a hand to his lips, silencing him with a look that spoke of every secret they had ever shared. In that moment, the world shrank to the space between them, the hush of the hall, the storm's distant fury, the heat of the fire casting restless shadows across their faces. She recalled the vows she had made to a king she did not love, the oath that bound her to this fortress and all it represented. Yet her heart beat only for the man before her, his presence a wound and a balm in equal measure. Outside, the soldiers' voices rose, suspicion nipping at the edges of safety. Sir Edryn's decree hung in the air like a drawn blade. All traitors were to be executed by dawn. Serelith's hands faltered as she bandaged Kadrin's ribs, the memory of the ring burning against her skin. She remembered the night he had left, the promise he swore, return to me, no matter the cost. Now, that vow was a shackle she could not break. If you have ever felt the battle between love and loyalty ignite within your own soul, let your heart remain by this fire. For Serelith's next choice will test the very boundaries of devotion. As the night deepened and the storm battered the walls, Serelith moved quietly through the fortress, weaving her way from the hall to the crypt below. She guided Kadrin along hidden passages, their journey measured in heartbeats and held breaths. Each step was a risk, a betrayal of the king, a gamble with her own life. The crypt was cold, the air thick with centuries of dust and sorrow. Here, Beneath the watchful eyes of stone angels, she laid Cadrin on a bed of cloaks, her hands lingering for a moment on his brow. His eyes found hers, full of questions and the old unspoken promise. She did not answer, for no words could bridge the chasm between what was owed and what was desired. In the silence, memories pressed in. The taste of stolen apples, the warmth of his arms around her waist, the day the war began and everything good was torn asunder. Serelith's heart ached with the weight of what might have been. She sat by his side as the hours crept by, listening to the storm and the distant clamor of soldiers searching above. Every sound was a threat, every footfall a reminder that the world had no mercy for traitors or lovers bound by broken oaths. Cadrin drifted in and out of restless sleep, fevered dreams painting shadows on the walls. Serelith held his hand, her thumb tracing the scar on his knuckle, a mark from the day they swore to protect each other, when the world was still green and hope unfettered. She wondered how many times he had thought of that promise, whether it had sustained him in the darkness of war or become another chain around his heart. Above, the king's men grew restless, their search tightening like a noose. At dawn, the envoy would demand blood, hers or Cadrin's, perhaps both. Serelith's mind raced with plans and half-formed prayers. She could still abandon him, deliver him to the king and preserve her place, her life, her oath. But at what cost? The old gods whispered from the shadows, their voices tangled with longing and regret. She pressed her lips to Cadrin's brow, a promise and a farewell entwined in the gesture. In the stillness, she made her choice. She would not let him die, not for the king, not for a war that had already claimed too much. She would risk everything, even her soul, to save the boy who had once been her world. And if the price was her own freedom, her own life, then so be it. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the stone, Serelith rose, her resolve forged as unbreakable as the chains that bound her duty. The storm was not yet over. Outside, the fortress braced itself for the coming reckoning, but within the crypt, love stirred, fragile and fierce as flame. If the taste of sacrifice lingers on your tongue, and the scent of rain-soaked stone awakens memories of longing, do not turn away. The story has only begun, and the price of devotion will demand more than even the bravest heart can bear. Stay by the fire, for in the shadows of Eldengar, chains of power are forged and broken, and the fate of two souls hangs by a single trembling thread. Night in Eldengar stretched thick and restless as oil, the air pulsing with the aftershocks of the storm. Beneath the fortress, in the crypt's hush where dust drifted like ghosts and candlelight flickered over ancient tombs, Serelith watched Cadrin's chest rise and fall. His breath was ragged, his skin fevered, and the wound at his side seeped through the torn fabric of his tunic. Every heartbeat echoed the memory of laughter beneath sunlit boughs, of hands entwined before duty's shadow fell. She pressed a damp cloth to his brow, recalling the promise he made on the eve of war. Return, no matter the cost. That cost had come due in blood and broken allegiances. Above, the fortress creaked and whispered with uneasy life. The king's soldiers stalked the corridors, boots ringing on cold flagstones, their voices sharp with suspicion. The scent of rain lingered, mingling with the ancient stone and the iron tang of fear. Serelith's hands trembled as she folded away the bloodied cloth. She remembered the ring secreted in her bodice, a circle of hammered silver pressed into her palm by Cadrin's shaking fingers the night they parted. It had been a symbol of hope once. Now it felt like a shackle, binding her to the past, even as the present threatened to devour them both. She moved quietly through the crypt, gathering herbs and water, the hush broken only by Cadrin's faint murmurs. He spoke in dreams, names long buried, pleas for forgiveness, fragments of battles lost, and friendships betrayed. His words twisted the knife in her heart. She wanted to wake him, to ease his pain, but fear gripped her. Even here, stone and shadow could not keep out the world's demands. Every hour brought the risk of discovery closer. Every prayer for his recovery tightened the noose around her own fate. At dawn, Serelith ascended from the crypt, the fortress stirring to life above her. She moved through corridors lined with tapestries and torchlight, her face composed, her eyes wary. Servants whispered, their glances sharp as knives. The king's envoy had arrived at sunrise, a hawk-faced man draped in black, bearing a decree sealed with crimson wax. All traitors were to be executed by the next nightfall. No exceptions, no mercy. The words rippled through the stone halls, igniting a fever of suspicion. Serelith felt every gaze linger on her, as if the truth of her betrayal were written in the pallor of her skin. She sought refuge in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, as she had so many nights before. This time, her prayers were silent screams. She begged for clarity, for strength, for some sign that her heart's rebellion would not damn them both. The stained glass cast fractured light across her face, painting her in the colors of blood and fire. She remembered the first time she saw Cadron after the war began. His eyes hard, voice distant, all the warmth of boyhood burned away by loss. He had crossed enemy lines to see her, risking his life for a moment's solace. She had not wept then. She would not weep now. A sudden commotion in the courtyard shattered her reverie. Through the narrow window, she glimpsed soldiers dragging another prisoner to the stocks. A gaunt woman, hands bound, head held high despite the jeers. Betrayal was everywhere, blooming in the cracks of loyalty. Fear was a contagion, and Serelith felt it infecting every corner of Eldengar. She returned to the crypt that evening, her every step measured, heart pounding with the knowledge that time was running thin. Cadron was awake when she entered, his eyes bright with fever and pain. He tried to rise, but she pressed him gently back. She told him of the decree, her voice a whisper in the gloom. He looked at her, truly looked, as if seeing her not just as the Lady of Eldengar, but as the girl who once chased fireflies in the orchard, who swore to stand by him no matter the cost. The silence between them was heavy with all that had changed and all that remained unbroken. She tended his wounds, hands lingering longer than need dictated, her touch a confession in itself. He spoke of the war, of friends lost, of oaths shattered by necessity. He spoke of the night he left, how he had watched her from the shadowed gate, unable to say goodbye. She listened, her heart a storm of longing and regret. He asked her if she remembered the ring, and she nodded, tears burning unshed behind her eyes. She confessed that she wore it still, hidden close to her heart, a secret rebellion against everything she was supposed to be. Outside, thunder rolled once more. The king's soldiers scoured the fortress, searching for any sign of conspiracy. One loyal servant, old Maera, who had nursed Serelith as a child, brought word that the search would soon reach the chapel and crypt. The walls were closing in. Serelith's mind raced, desperation sharpening her resolve. She remembered the hidden passage beneath the altar, sealed for generations, its existence known only to the true heirs of Eldengar. It was a dangerous route, winding through forgotten catacombs and into the tangled woods beyond the fortress walls. But it was their only hope. That night, Serelith led Cadron from the crypt, supporting his weight as they moved through the labyrinthine darkness. Every step was a prayer, every breath a gamble. They paused in the old chapel, moonlight spilling through shattered glass. Serelith knelt, pressing her palm to the cold stone, reciting the words passed down in secret by her ancestors. With a groan, the slab shifted, revealing a stair spiraling into blackness. She helped Cadron descend, her own fear eclipsed by the need to see him safe. In the passage's gloom, memories pressed close. Serelith recalled the time before war, when she and Cadron had explored these tunnels in childish games, dreaming of dragons and hidden treasures. Now, every shadow threatened betrayal, every sound a warning. They moved in silence, hearts beating in tandem, the unspoken promise between them more binding than any oath sworn to a king. Halfway through the passage, Cadrin faltered. Weakness claimed him, and Serelith wrapped her arms around his shoulders, holding him upright. She whispered that she would not leave him, not now, not ever. He reached for her hand, their fingers locking together, a silent pact forged in desperation. The world above might be lost to them, but in this darkness, they belonged only to each other. They emerged at last in a ruined chapel deep within the forest, the sky above streaked with the first blush of dawn. Serelith tended Cadrin's wounds by the flicker of a stolen lantern, her hands sure despite the tremor in her heart. He told her then, voice rough, eyes bright with pain and longing, that he had never stopped loving her, not even as war turned them into enemies. She pressed her lips to his brow, a benediction and a farewell. She told him that her love was his alone, though the world would call it treason. Their sanctuary was short-lived. In the distance, horns sounded, the king's men in pursuit. Serelith knew what she must do. She pressed the ring into Cadrin's hand, whispering that it was not a farewell but a promise, one last defiance in the face of fate's cruelty. She would draw the soldiers away, buy him time to escape, even if it meant her own capture. Her sacrifice was a final act of devotion, the price demanded by a world that would not allow their love. As she slipped away into the trees, the weight of her decision settled over her like a shroud. She did not look back. In the hush before the storm's return, her heart burned with the knowledge that in loving Cadrin, she had broken every chain but one, the chain that bound her soul to his, unyielding even in the face of ruin. If ever you have chosen loyalty over safety or love over law, linger by the fire. The end is not yet written, and the shadows of Eldengar still hold secrets the dawn has yet to see. The forest swallowed Serelith's silhouette as she moved deeper into the shadows, branches clawing at her cloak, the cold seeping through to her bones. Behind her, the shouts of soldiers shattered the hush, iron boots trampling the undergrowth, torches flickering like hungry eyes. Each step she took was a silent testament, not to surrender, but to a love that refused to be extinguished by command or consequence. She pressed on, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to turn and search for Cadrin's shape in the darkness, yet she did not falter. Her purpose was a blade, sharp, painful, unwavering. The storm broke anew above Eldengar, rain slashing through the trees, thunder rolling across the hills. The soldiers fanned out, their voices barking orders, hounds straining at leashes. Serelith's breath came in gasps, her feet sinking into mud, but she moved with the desperation of one who has nothing left to lose. In her mind, memories surfaced unbidden. A stolen summer beneath the willow, laughter echoing along the river's edge, Cadrin's fingers entwined with hers as they whispered promises meant for braver times. Those memories were her armor now, fragile against the onslaught of reality, yet strong enough to carry her onward. A fallen log offered brief shelter as the hounds passed by, their handlers cursing the night. She pressed herself into the earth, heart hammering. Rain masked the sound of her weeping, a quiet surrender to the agony of what she had chosen. She could not know if Cadrin had found the lower path, if he moved now through secret tunnels toward the river, or if he lingered, risking all for one last glimpse of her. The uncertainty was a wound deeper than any blade. The pursuit tightened as dawn crept toward the horizon, pale light filtering through the canopy. Serelith's limbs ached, her dress torn and sodden, yet she forced herself onward. She did not pray for rescue, only for time. Enough for Cadrin to reach the outer wall, enough for her sacrifice to mean something beyond regret. When at last the soldiers caught her, she rose from the mud with eyes unbowed, a queen in exile. The captain, grim and unsparing, demanded answers. She met his gaze, voice steady, as she wove a tale of a lone rebel who had fled into the night, of loyalty unbroken and duty fulfilled. Each word was a stone laid upon the grave of her old life. They bound her wrists and led her back toward Eldengar, torches held high, as if to banish the ghosts her passage left behind. The fortress loomed through the mist, cold and indifferent, its gates gaping like the maw of a beast. Serelith's thoughts drifted to the chapel, sanctuary and prison both, the scent of old wax and wilted lilies, the echo of her own footsteps on ancient stone. She pictured Cadrin's face, the line of worry at his brow, the sorrow in his eyes as he realized what she had done. She clung to that image, drawing strength from the connection that no chain could sever. Within the walls, the mood was tense, whispers seething through the corridors. The king's envoy awaited her in the great hall, draped in sable and steel, his expression a mask of righteous fury. Before the assembled court, Serelith stood alone, the weight of her lineage pressing down like iron. The envoy pronounced her crimes, harboring a traitor, betraying her oath, defying the will of the crown. Each accusation was a blade, yet she did not flinch. She confessed to her actions, but not to regret. Her voice rang clear, carrying across the hall and into the memories of all who listened. She spoke not of treason, but of love, of a bond forged before loyalties were written in blood, before war made monsters of men and martyrs of the innocent. As judgment was passed, a hush fell. The sentence was exile, the stripping of title and home, a fate meant to break her spirit. Yet as Serelith was led away, a hush lingered, a collective recognition that something precious had been sacrificed, that the old ways had claimed another soul, but not its heart. Outside, the storm had spent its rage, leaving the world washed raw and cold. The streets of Eldengar watched in silence as she was marched toward the northern gate, a solitary figure beneath a sky bruised by dawn. Beyond the walls, the land stretched wild and uncertain. Serelith's steps faltered only once as she reached the crest of the hill and looked back at the fortress that had been her home and her cage. She did not weep. Instead, she pressed a hand to her chest, where Cadrin's ring hung hidden, its promise burning like a secret sun. The memory of his voice guided her onward, a vow whispered in darkness, a hope that outlasts despair. If ever your heart has held to a promise when all the world demanded surrender, take these embers and hold them close. Weeks passed in a haze of hunger and wandering, the wilds testing her resolve as no prison ever could. Once she glimpsed figures on the horizon, riders bearing the king's crest, but she vanished into the ruins of an old abbey, her silhouette swallowed by shadows. Each night she dreamed of Cadrin. Sometimes he came to her across a field of fire, reaching out with hands stained by battle and longing. Sometimes she heard him calling her name, the syllables torn by wind and time. She awoke each morning with the ache of absence, but never with regret. In time, rumors reached her, a rebel victory along the river, the king's men turned back by a force led by a knight with storm-grey eyes. Whispers carried tales of a leader who spared the innocent, who fought with a heart unbroken by hate. Serelith listened, hope blooming with every word. She left tokens in the places they had once known, a sprig of heather at the old well, a ribbon tied to the willow's bough, each a silent message for the one who might yet return. Seasons shifted. The world moved on, but some stories refused to fade. One dusk, as frost crept along the stones of a ruined tower, Serelith heard footsteps, a quiet, measured tread, hesitant yet familiar. She turned, heart stilled by disbelief. Cadrin stood before her, changed by exile and war, yet unmistakably hers. No words passed between them in that first fragile moment. The air was thick with all that had been lost and all that might yet be reclaimed. He reached for her hand, and she saw the chain he wore around his wrist, broken but never cast off. She touched it, tracing the scar it had left upon his skin. In that touch, the years of longing, pain, and hope braided together, forging a bond stronger than any vow spoken before gods or kings. Cadrin offered her the life they had once dreamed, a life on the edge of the world, free from the dictates of power or fear. Serelith, in turn, gave him her trust, her forgiveness, and all the pieces of her heart that had survived the storm. They did not return to Eldengar. Instead, their legend grew in the quiet places, among villagers who spoke of two lovers crossing borders in the night, of a lady and a knight whose courage defied the cruelty of thrones. Their love was not without scars, nor did it erase the cost of all they had endured. But in every dawn that found them together, in every silence shared beside a humble hearth, Serelith and Cadrin discovered a freedom that the world could neither grant nor take away. If you have ever stood at the edge of ruin and chosen love over fear, let this tale be your lantern in the dark. The chains of power can bind the body and break the will, but the heart is a wilder thing, unruly, unyielding, forever reaching for the hand that makes it whole. So remember, as the embers fade and the fire dies low, the true measure of devotion is not the promise given, but the price paid in its keeping. And somewhere in the quiet beyond the storm, two souls walk together, unchained at last.